Today we have a special guest, Marco Fernandes, with us. Welcome, Marco. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Marco is a geopolitical analyst for Brazil de Fato, and he's an editor of Wenhua Zhongchang Journal.
Zhongheng.
Zhongheng. Okay, sorry my pronunciation. I'm not very good at Chinese yet, but I'm working on that. So we are very happy to see you here with us. Marco's insights will help us understand Brazil's recent moves with Russia and China and what it means for the bigger picture. As soon as Marco is based in Beijing, he discovered for us the role of China in the global order and the role of Latin America as well. So, Marco, you have got a pretty unique view of all the stuff going up. So, like global South solidarity, China's growing influence, and all the latest geopolitical shifts. So, we are excited to explore his insights on Brazil's evolving role in foreign policy and China's growing role in Latin America and the broader dynamics shaping global order today. And above all of this, Marco Fernandes is a member of BRICS Civil Council. That is interesting as well. I know that our viewers love so much our analysis about geopolitics, but I would like to start with BRICS Civil Council. Please, Marco, could you tell us about this organization and what do they do for the BRICS?
Sure. Well, first of all, Anastasia, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with your audience, Think BRICS. So first of all, the Civil Council was established last year in Kazan Summit of BRICS. So it was endorsed by the leaders, and then we started working in the countries of BRICS, like member countries. So now in BRICS, we have a few councils and forums. For instance, in terms of council, you have the Business Council, Think Tank Council, and the Youth Council. So Civil Council is one that we were missing, and now we're working on that. So in the last months, we have been organizing. We have like an international board with all the BRICS countries, the member countries. And because, of course, this year is Brazil's chairmanship, we in Brazil have more work to do. So we have been organizing some working groups to discuss with different members of civil society, social grassroots movements and scholars and also think tanks. And we have been discussing all the priorities of the Brazilian chairmanship, or 6 priorities. And actually we made up we made a proposal, some proposals for each one of the 6 priorities. And now actually what's happening, we did like a historical meeting a few weeks ago in Brazil when we had the second Sherpas meeting. It was the first time that the Sherpas actually opened a dialogue with the civil society. So all these councils and forums, we were there and we could present our own proposals in one page to the Sherpas. So I think it was a very important step. It was made by the Brazilian government, and we expect that this kind of space and dialogue can be kept in the next years for BRICS. So that's more or less what's going on right now.
So BRICS civil society is aimed to connect people to people, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because actually, I think BRICS will promote that too, because there is a meaning that BRICS is something somewhere at highest levels among ministers, among prime ministers, presidents, and so on. But BRICS is more about people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we have to move forward in the next years is exactly how to build these connections, because governments might change, but the people will stay. And of course, if BRICS it's only once a year or a few meetings of the leaders, you cannot create something more solid in terms of the connections among the people. I have a friend in Russia that he made this joke like, okay, right now BRICS is a 11 or 19 with the partner countries, is a 19 members group, 19 people, 19 men or women. They are the leaders. The question is how to make BRICS a 4 billion members group.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think this is one of the tasks and one of the challenges for the Civil Council.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
So now we are going to some more interesting topic for our viewers might be. We are talking about geopolitics. Marco, I would like to talk about recent Lula's diplomatic tour. Moscow and Beijing. So we have seen, maybe our viewers as well, that Brazil's President Lula da Silva visited Moscow for Victory Days celebrations. But after that, Brazilian president went to China. My question is, how do you see Brazil's, we can say, tricky situation with Russia and China, and the same time Brazil is under the pressure from the West? So Brazil tries to balance between Russia and China, meanwhile dealing with the US, the European Union as well. So what does it say about Brazil's broader foreign policy in the current global order?
Sure, that's a very good question, because I mean, this is exactly the situation that Brazil, as a big power of the region, as the main economy of Latin America and the Caribbean, has to deal with. Because, well, first of all, we are in US backyard, as they like to say. But there's also some objective pressures, economic pressures, that Brazil has to deal with. Because first of all, right now, China is the largest trading partner of Brazil for 15 years already. By far, it's the largest trading partner. US is the second trading partner, but US is the main investor in Brazil. I mean, if you get the foreign direct FDIs, just to have one idea, last year, US invested $71 billion in Brazil.
And China?
And China now, for instance, the agreements that was just signed with President Lula was less than 5. And it's not for 1 year, it's more than 1 year.
Gradually.
So US is the main source of investment. And also, if you go to the trade, the profile of the trade, of course, Brazil has a big surplus trade with China, which is rare. Most of the countries has deficit with China. Brazil had like around $35 billion surplus last year. With the US, we have a deficit, actually, but US is the main buyer of Brazilian manufacturing.
And agriculture.
No, agriculture is China. That's the thing. I mean, Brazil exports like 90% of Brazilian exports to China is basically soy, iron ore, crude oil, beef, and corn. So it's all commodities, food and energy, which is okay, it's good, it's important for the country. But we know for the economy, the more you export manufacturing, the better for the economy and for the society, because it's better jobs, it's better, skilled jobs, etc. So US is right now the main buyer of Brazilian manufacturers. So this also puts Brazil in a very complex situation, have to deal with both. Brazil cannot pick side. I mean, a big country like Brazil cannot pick side, but of course US wants the countries in Latin America to pick sides. So this, I think, will be one of the tensions that Brazil has to deal with. And finally, the Brazilian elite is historically and culturally very tied to the US. I mean, many of Brazilian rich people, they have houses in Miami, they have green cards, their kids go to school in US, etc. So, of course, culturally and historically, we're very tied to the US. So this also complicates, I would say, in terms of the correlation of forces. But of course, I mean, China, Russia, BRICS, this is a future for Brazil. There's no doubt about it. But we still have to deal with our past. So I think this is one of the big challenges that any president in Brazil, especially the ones like President Lula, who puts a lot of energy and bets on BRICS. So this is the challenge that he has to deal with.
I see. We can say definitely it is not an easy situation for the Brazilian government.
No, it's not.
Absolutely.
No, it's not.
We should say why President Lula went to China. Because after the Victory Day in China started the Forum of Latin American Countries, CELAC Forum. That started 15th, if I'm not mistaken, of May.
Yeah,
14th,
15th,
15th,
13th, yeah.
And we should say that China is trying to build good relations with every Latin American country, despite the fact that among that Latin American countries, there are supporters of Taiwan, for example, but still China steadily develops diplomatic relations with them. There is Colombia that probably will join Belt and Road. China patiently, step by step, goes towards Latin America. So we know that, Marco mentioned that Brazilian president and the Chinese president, they made several agreements about investments, about infrastructural investments also, and banking loans in Chinese currency. I'm just wondering whether this forum is mainly about growing economic influence or if it's a part of a plan to change political and financial alliances in the region away from US domination.
Again, I think it was an important step. But again, Latin American Caribbean has more or less same issue as Brazil. And I would say more in terms of trading partner. Overall, for CELAC countries, US is still the main trading partner. Overall, is the main source of investments, and of course, politically has a huge power to influence the region. But of course, China has been the relationship between CELAC and China has been growing a lot in terms of trade. For instance, in the last 20 years, went from $12 billion to $500 billion, more than $500 billion last year. In terms of investment infrastructure, I mean, there's no competition right now. It's only coming from China. US has almost zero investments in infrastructure. And this is one of the things that is most important for all the select countries, is both infrastructure and transfer of technology. And again, US is not going to, I don't know if you know that, but it's illegal in US to transfer technology to another countries. The US Congress forbidden US, even if, I don't know, Trump in one of his craziest nights said, oh, I'm going to transfer technology to Brazil, I'm going to make a deal with that. No, the Congress say, no, you cannot.
No, I cannot.
So of course, I mean, China is the place to go to have this kind of deals. And I would say that right now, for instance, we have this huge project, which is the Chancay port in Peru, which is a potential revolution in the freights for Latin America towards Asia. But there's one more issue about this project, which is being discussed also directly with Brazil, which is they call the bioceanic routes. So right now, there's also a very important discussion, besides the Chancay port, is how to connect Brazil and other countries of South America to the Chancay port. President Lula made a very important statement this week. He said, look, we don't want, with the connection with Chancay port, we don't want just to be a path to exports to Asia. We want this to be a element of integration of South America and Latin America. Because, one of the biggest problems we have in select countries is that our economic integration is very, very low. It's actually the lowest economic integration in the world, in regions, is Latin America and Caribbean. It's around 12% according to the IMF. Only, which means for the audience, for everything that Latin America and Caribbean countries export, only 12% goes to, is an intra-regional trade, goes to CELAC countries. 88% goes outside. Even sub-Saharan Africa is more integrated, 15%, than Latin America. So in one of the bottlenecks we have is the lack of infrastructure, the lack of connections, like road connections, railway connections. So that's why this Chancay port and the possible connections, and this has been discussed. President Lula was discussed this with President Xi Jinping. They don't have still like a final agreement, but we are expecting this for the next months. This would be very, very important for the region. And I would say also in terms of the CELAC China Forum, another important step. Oh, first of all, you mentioned Colombia. Colombia joined officially the Belt and Road Initiative. We are now, of course, Petro will get a huge pressure from the White House, as we know, but I think it was a very important step and very bold step from him. And also, finally, I would say very important in this forum was this the so-called Beijing letter that it was like an official joint statement. Some people are saying, oh, this would be the substitution for the Washington consensus. I would not go so far yet, but there was two very important topics that they mentioned. First of all, is that China say it's supporting a CELAC candidate for as a permanent member of the Security Council of United Nations, which means it's Brazil, of course. So it's there. And other important thing, which is a campaign that President Lula is already doing, is to have the next General Secretary of United Nations to be somebody from CELAC, from the Latin American Caribbean, and a woman. And this is something that China also supported in the letter to Beijing. China is supporting a CELAC candidate for the as a Secretary General of United Nations. So I think this was very important diplomatic achievements of the CELAC, China CELAC Forum.
A lot of things happened.
Yes.
But we may say, I don't know, me personally, I didn't see so much attention from the US media towards this event. I don't know why. How do you think? Maybe everything is connected to that tensions and trading war between China and the United States. So maybe that's why in the United States they, I don't know, subdued this event in comparison to the past events, past decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually even better that they don't talk about it, because when they talk about this kind of events, they actually undermine it. They actually say, "Oh, this is nothing." And actually, there was a the representative for the State Department for Latin America. It's I think it's Mauricio Caroni. He actually made some statements regarding Brazil-China relationship, and also, for Latin America, say, "Oh, you guys are making a big mistake to get closer to China. You guys should not do this because, you cannot trust them. Yeah, they stack traps and etc. All this bullshit that they have been saying lately. But of course, we know that they will put pressure. I mean, look what happened in Panama recently. This was like a mafia thing, right? Go there, you squeeze a president, you say you have to get out of Belt and Road, you have to get this Chinese out of the ports, and otherwise, we don't know what was the conditions, but we're expecting that for instance, they will put pressure in Colombia now because of Belt and Road. And of course, there was already some informal messages in Brazil saying that, oh, the White House is not so happy if Brazil makes the connection with the Chancay port. So this is something that the Brazilian media was.
It seems someone should ask for permission. I don't know.
yes, but this is how they treat us. We are the backyard. Actually, with Biden, we were upgraded a little bit. Remember that Biden said, no, Latin America is not our backyard, it's our front yard.
Yeah.
So we got like a bit upgraded. But now Trump, we went back to the backyard again. But we don't want to be backyard or front yard. We want to have our houses. We want to build our houses.
Sovereign.
Exactly, and live in our houses as a sovereign region.
I see. But as soon as we touch the topic of the United States and China trade war, I would like to dive deeper into it. So as soon as you are based in China, might be you will open up for us some, I don't know, new information about that. The recent negotiations. So all of us, we know the results, and for someone it was a surprise, for others it was not. But with the two countries still in talks to ease the trade war, what's your take on China's current approach? Is China willing to make some big but short-term concessions to reduce tensions? Or is it focusing more on building a long-term economic strength and independence instead of quick benefits? China's position.
That's a good question. I think, first of all, I think who has to do concessions right now is the U.S., is not China, because I think China now has the upper hand in this. I think in this conflict. So first of all, what China has been doing the last years, especially after 2017, when Trump launched the first trade war against China, China realized that the U.S. was no longer a reliable partner at that point. So they started doing in a very Chinese way, like silently, no big statements, no big headlines, but started to decouple from US. It's funny because actually US and Europe has been talking about decoupling from China, decoupling from China. Then realized, oh, we cannot decouple, but we can de-risk. So now it's de-risking from China, de-risking. But actually China is de-risking from the West, and especially from US. And I'll give you some data about it. For instance, in terms of trade, China's trade with US now, or China's exports to US now, represents around 2% of Chinese GDP. It's not like a big thing. Of course, it's important. I don't know, $600 billion, something like this last year, but it's only 2% of Chinese GDP. And now I think the total trade With the US, I think is around 11, 12%
Mm-hmm.
overall. So China has a lot of other partners, ASEAN,
Yeah.
and strengthening with Africa and Latin America, and even trying to sort of like recreate the relationship with Europe. Let's see what Europe will do in the next steps. But so this one point. The other point is in terms of the big China has a lot of U.S. bonds, right?
Yeah.
It was at some point China had 1.3 trillion dollars in U.S. bonds, like a
Huge.
few years ago. But guess what? Now it's only 800 billion dollars,
So
and you don't see China like stating, "Oh,
we're selling.
yes, we're selling. You guys are not reliable." No, no, they're just selling very silently. Last year, for
Slowly.
instance, April last year, it was the record high. They sold like more than $50 billion in bonds in 1 month.
Mm.
But you don't see one statement from President Xi Jinping or anybody from the Chinese government. So they are doing this. They are step by step. They are decoupling also in terms of the holding of the U.S. debts. And finally, technology, because China, no matter what, in for the last 30 years, it was absolutely was relying absolutely in US
Mm-hmm.
and European technology. But of course, since US started all the attacks, trade war, then the sanctions, then the Huawei sanctions,
Yeah.
China realized they cannot rely on that and has to produce, develop its own technology. So China has been doing that. Look at what happened to Huawei. Huawei had a major blow when Trump announced first the sanctions, and we can. I mean, I have a Huawei phone. I don't have Google. I don't. So, I mean, this is the kind of
In
things that,
China, you don't need
yeah, in
it.
China you don't need. But if you are a foreigner there connected to Brazil, it's hard not to have the Western tools. But anyway, but Huawei it's back. It's back and diversifying, because this was more a problem with the cell phones. Now Huawei is doing smart cars. Huawei is doing the most advanced technology, for instance, for coal mining, which is a very dangerous actually activity, and they are revolutionizing the coal mining sector. They're doing a lot of, I mean, they are producing robotics. They're producing their own super chips. So Huawei is doing this, and look at what happened with DeepSeek. It was a huge blow to the US hegemony on artificial intelligence. So, and China is, first of all, I think talking about somebody, I mean, I've been in China for more than 5 years. You see how much Chinese people is getting more and more confident, how much young Chinese scientists or young Chinese entrepreneurs, they are getting more and more confident, say we don't need them. We don't need US. I mean, if they want to like war with us, they want to like attack us all the time. And I mean, I'm sorry, we are doing our own path.
I remember there was even a program in China, state program of calling the Chinese students from abroad back home.
Oh yeah, this is happening, and what's happening also, it's actually a good point. There is a lot of like high level scientists, top scientists coming back from US, especially because actually they are being persecuted in US. They are being I mean, oh, you guys, this is the Chinese spies, etc. So some of the top scientists working in US for 20 years, they're now coming back to China. So once again, this kind of stupid policies of US is just one more shoot in the foot. And some, even like there was American scientist, I think chemical scientist, that just moved to China because he was accused of being a Chinese spy. So now he's working in China. Exactly. So
what would you expect? Yeah. Actually, do you think that decoupling is inevitable?
I think at some point, I mean, if you ask this in China, they would never say yes. They would say, we don't want the couple. We think that we should have good relations. We think that the partnership between China and US is crucial for so many topics, for the like environment, poverty, inequalities. I mean, everything. But I think we are moving towards that. But one of the worries that some people have now is that US is realizing, and I think a lot of people in US elite ruling class already realized, that they can no longer stop China. So I think a lot of people in US especially in the elite, in the ruling class, they already realized that they can no longer stop China with economic attacks, with sanctions, all these kind of things. Tariffs. And some people is already thinking there's only one way. It's a war. So I think this is the biggest threat that we have now. And if you go to US media in the last, I would say, couple of years, it's shocking. So for instance, a few months ago, Newsweek, this famous weekly magazine, they have some simulations of, what would happen in a case of a nuclear attack in Beijing? How many people will die? 1.5 million people. Oh, how many people will die in Moscow? How many people will die in Pyongyang? And how many people will die in New York, in Washington? I mean, you see this all the times. Or you go to TV, you can find this in YouTube. There's some like war games being shown to the American audience. Oh, an attack in a Chinese attack in Taiwan. So this is how US would react. This is how China would counter react. So, I mean, they are already talking about wars. It's not theory. I'm not paranoid. I'm just watching US media. They are talking about war all the time. So I think this is one of the biggest threats that we have. And to be honest, I think countries like Russia, China, Iran, even Brazil, I think one of the challenges, and I'm talking also about BRICS, is how to not to let this thing happen, because this would be catastrophe.
Disastrous.
Exactly. Yeah.
Recently, there was information about Iran and the United States deal. Again, one more time. I don't know how many times they made that deal. So I see, Marco, it's a very interesting point you touch. And for those who want to know more about US and China, economic and tariff war, please follow our Substack. There is an article, very interesting, one of our collaborators that says that and agrees with Marco's point that decoupling is inevitable. Only time will show, who knows?
Yeah.
And the last question, Marco, for you, I would like to ask you about the next summit that will be in Rio de Janeiro this July. Brazil is the chair this year, so we cannot avoid
Of course.
these questions. The main question is, what is the plan for shaping the agenda? You told about 6 main priorities. Could you tell us what are the 6 main priorities? And then we will talk about if they are actually can be implemented due to some political issues in Brazilian society, and there are some skepticism about Brazil's role in BRICS.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember all the 6. One is cooperation in health, institutionalization of BRICS, finance, artificial intelligence. But I think, well, some of these priorities I'm sort of following with some, information that I have in Brasilia. Some discussions are being held. Actually, Brazil already announced that they will propose a global alliance on health, especially regarding diseases from tropical and low income countries. Yeah, diseases that are not treated by Western scientists or institutions, because it's only poor people, so they're not gonna sell medicine to them. So this is one of the things that I think might be interesting. More or less what was the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty that Brazil launched last year in the G20 chairmanship. They are trying to do this with health now. I would say that from all the priorities, I think probably one that is very crucial for BRICS, and there is a chance to have some achievement, is in financial topics.
So economic integration.
Yeah, it's actually more about the alternative payment system. That is something that is already on the table of BRICS for many years, and we still didn't have a consensus to move forward. So I think, and to be honest, if we achieve this, I think this year, I think already will be a very important achievement, because BRICS in the last years, I think in the last 2 years, we had very important expansions. 2023, the new full members, 2024 in Russia, the new partner members. So I think this was a big achievement, a big step for BRICS. But in terms of economic cooperation, which we have huge potential in so many areas in BRICS, I think we're still missing more achievements. So if we can have this this year, this alternative payment system to be an alternative to SWIFT, I think it will be already a very important step. But touching your point, is true. I think in terms of the role of Brazil in BRICS, I think in the last year, Brazil had a sort of ambiguous, I would say, position. For instance, if you think about how was the participation of Brazil during the Russian chairmanship, Brazil didn't put a lot of efforts, for instance, to come with ministers. And I remember I was here in Moscow in September. I was in a parallel meeting to the meeting of the Minister of Finance and central banks. And Brazil sent I would say, a low-level official as the head of the delegation in a very important meeting. So that, I think, was not good for the whole process of BRICS last year. This year, because Brazil has COP30, Brazil actually set the summit for July, early July, 6th and 7th of July, in my hometown, Rio, by the way, the most beautiful city in the world. So everybody is invited to come and see with their own eyes. But we know that for the kind of complex discussions and negotiations that we have at BRICS, and especially now with the 10 or 11 countries, depending of Saudi Arabia, that we don't know if it's in or out, July is too early. I mean,
not enough time to prepare.
Exactly. I mean, Russia had at the end of October, so it was like 3 more months, more than 3 months more. So I think this is a worry that many of us in Brazil have since the beginning of the year, when Brazil announced that the summit will be held in July. So I'm not so optimistic about some of these topics, because I think we lack time. But I think if Brazil is able at least to make sure that some of these achievements, for instance, the Global Alliance for Health Cooperation and, for instance, an alternative for SWIFT, I think it will be already a good achievement and will mark the Brazilian chairmanship. And let's see what's going to happen next year with the Indian chairmanship, which is a question mark.
Well, thank you, Marco. Thank you for your time. Thank you for accepting our invitation. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, and if you, our dear viewers, found this interview interesting, please like, subscribe, and follow our channel. See you next time.